Okay, guys. Hey, so we're very lucky to have Orca Performance here with us today. We've got Prav, we've got Taylor, and they flew from Canada. So Orca are a partner and client of ours, and they've really just changed the landscape in Canada, and I would also argue North America, around the way we use our technology, systemization, and getting some monetization value from Vault as well. So me as a BDM, I typically get probably 1 to 2 messages from other colleagues across the world around Orca, around what they do, what makes them so successful. So we decided that we would bring them to VALDcon. Yeah, I suppose with help, a lot of people will buy our tech and they'll just expect it to happen. They expect the frameworks to be there. They expect everything to just work for them like magic. So what Orca have managed to do is systemize their approach. I brought Chris Rowe to their facility in March of this year. He was so impressed by that. So speaking with the guys, I think what they're going to do here today is try and run through that visit remotely and show you exactly what Orca is about. And with that, I'll hand it over to Taylor.
I think we're finally on the time zone now, so hopefully we're a little bit more switched on than this. But I think where we'll start with the presentation is I'll just tackle the first couple of slides and go into the origin story and kind of the why of where we started and kind of where we are now, and then Trav will take over the rest of it. When we think about Orca for us, it's really about the idea of that blacksmith. Taking that molten metal, carving it into a sword. But once you have that, you can't stop. You got to continually sharpen it. And I think for us, having access to technology like the Valve products and a few other pieces within our facility, that allows us to continue to sharpen the sword and reach out to brilliant minds that are in this facility as well and have a week like we have so far. So, where we started. This picture was the first facility that we went into. I left the sport world and started training a couple Irish dancers and these 2 soccer players. And so we kind of rented this. It was honestly probably 200 square feet of space, and that's what we operated out of. And we slowly started to tap into our networks in Canada and bring on a few teams. And from there, we quickly lasted about 3 months in that facility and couldn't run it anymore. So then we cold called a guy named Ross came and landed in this facility, which is much bigger. It allowed us to expand our team training program. We worked up to about 35 club soccer teams at that time. And this is the facility that we brought our first Valve product into, which was in 2019, we brought the sports train. And it was originally called Evidence Performance, and I knew immediately I wanted my name on it because it's super hard to pronounce. And I think for us, we had a vision that we wanted to take it further. So that's what we did. And so Orca is a quick background. As I was rebranding it, I knew I wanted to have no more speak with it. I went through the dictionary and I found the definition of the strength, power, and energy to work. And it landed right away, and that's what we went with. And then I knew Trav through the sport world as well, and we kind of during COVID, before COVID, started to have a few different conversations of what the first iteration could look like. And this is what it was. It was a big box clinic, a big gym clinic in Calgary. I brought some equipment with my gym, my basement gym in there, and we started to train the rehab athletes within that space. And that's where we quickly realized that we wanted to do something further. So we brought, COVID happened. And that was all the equipment that landed in the back of my truck, and we had to shut everything down. And then we started to lay the framework for what the next idea should look like. And part of that idea for us, we had the 4 strings sitting there, and we really wanted to get an idea of how can we start to expand this idea of implementing technology, which hadn't happened in our province, and I'm not sure if it happened in Canada yet. So we took the 2 puzzle pieces, we took Orca, we took Valve, and we started to build some frameworks about how we can systemize that athlete process from our first performance testing through to utilizing the tech to guide the rehab process. And that was the first kind of iteration with it. Then you can kind of see some original ideas. There was a few. I'm just going to preface this. The plates in the bottom were not ours. They were the facility had them. So we quickly moved away from that when we went into our own facility as well. So this is kind of trapped in the middle there, working through an athlete. And we were able to kind of get some good ideas on paper. And this is where we signed the lease to our first facility. And this is the new space that we're in now. We're fortunate enough to be in a clinic and gym space that we can service a bunch of athletes. So we have around 1,000 athletes right now on both the performance and the rehab side. We've been able to integrate a lot of the rehab components within it. So you'll see a lot of our physiotherapists on the gym floor. They're working with the athletes. They're not on the bed. They're not on a tennis machine. They're not on a heat pack. We're getting them in the gym, and we're getting them closer to the goal of returning. And this is kind of the last slide that I'll touch on, and then I'll let Trav take over. The video on the left means everything to us because we always wanted the idea that if we had this facility, we wanted a stellar culture that the athletes could provide. We wanted a safe space that could develop, they could grow, and they could continue to love the game and have resources to develop further in the game. And so that group there of individuals came from completely different walks of life. One was a nursing student that worked as an elite referee. The others were a couple of post-op ACLs. They never met each other. And the byproduct of that was there was a facility that they could bond in. They had a group chat. They started coordinating workouts together. And I think from there, that set the foundation of we knew that was the path that we wanted to take, was just create more of this. And I think Trav's going to take you through kind of start to finish how we rolled it through. And I think throughout, if you guys want to take pictures of the slides, by all means, that point after the way and go from there. Good.
Thanks, Tim. So I think this is ultimately why we're all here together today is, how do we successfully integrate technology into organizations? And in the private sector, what's some common through lines between companies that are successfully integrating it right now, right? And I think to answer this question, we need to get down to the root issue, which is why are people hesitant at integrating it in the first place? Right? I think all PDMs probably get different types of objections in the acquisition phase when they're showing a product. So what's the root cause of that for that individual? And I think a lot of the issues can be boiled down to the root cause that individuals are just resistant to change. Right? That's one of the major fundamental issues we're going to see. So if a core solution to successful integration is helping these companies and these practitioners overcome their rejection to change, then how are we going to approach these practitioners with different influence tactics, with more and more emerging data supporting the use of technology in rehab and performance? See, it turns out that there's actually quantifiable reasons that people reject change. Okay? And as I read this out, I want you to think in your own life, do any of these resonate with you if you're rejecting change in a certain aspect, or do any rejections that you're getting in the acquisition phase of finance fall into one of these 5 categories? So we take a look at the first one being opinion and tradition, right? So I've been practicing this way successfully for many years. Why do I need the VALDcon now, right? Perception. Proposed change seems or appears inconsistent with values. Sorry, I don't use this stuff in practice. Or, like Peter alluded to, they may have the perception that this is going to increase time, not save them. Suppression. Maybe the practitioners at the clinic are on board. They've been sold and they're bought in. But the power brokers or the owners of the clinic see this or fear it as an admittance of knowledge gap if they bring this into their facilities. Suspicion. Who is Val? Who is this BDM? Right? Are they just selling me just some tech product, or are they selling me time and a solution? And finally, vision or lack thereof. Right? Do these individuals have the skills necessary to implement this? They might not see how this change can be implemented successfully within the frameworks they have currently, right? And they may be reluctant to give up their established procedures for new ones that they have to master when they potentially already, have their bottom line figured out. So when we take a look across Canada, and this is what we want to do, try to give you guys a little bit of insight into the Canadian landscape. When we talk to our colleagues, a lot of the rejections that come up when we ask them why they aren't using this in some of the decision making is rooted in lack of vision. right? So what does a lack of vision actually sound like in practice? We're not interested in subscriptions. Where are we going to find time to fit it in for our sessions? How are we going to make our money back? How are we going to market this to the public? They don't have that roadmap or vision on how they can overcome some of these objections. So it's easier just to say no or resist or come up with an excuse. So we actually, before here, formally surveyed colleagues from all across Canada. And it turns out what steered them towards their chosen brand was all the objections we just talked about. And whatever company they ended up going with helped them overcome that rejection, whether it be vision, suppression, perception, opinion, tradition. And then they acquired these pieces back in their brand. So for us, we want to just give some insight into how Taylor and I overcame this kind of lack of vision early doors. And I think for this, it's easiest to break it down into 3 steps: the acquisition phase, the implementation phase, and the retention phase. So we'll go over those 3 aspects, and then we'll just try to leave you guys with a couple of key takeaways in each aspect, just to simplify things a little bit. So let's take a deep dive into acquisition. What's the main problem in the acquisition phase? What's the roadblock that's stopping these clinics from acquiring data in the first place, or tech in the first place? And I'll tell you from a personal standpoint, when Taylor and I were first looking at the source frame, we mirrored exactly what our Canadian colleagues mirrored, where it was just lack of vision. We needed a roadmap. Yes, we said cost and we looked at numbers, but a lot of it was rooted in lack of vision. So we were lucky enough to have a roadmap laid out by other respected professionals, like the boys at AA, where we saw not only could we potentially integrate a rehab performance model, but we saw how they were implementing their tech. And it showed us that there is a bit of a roadmap here, and that helped us overcome our initial lack of vision. Right? So when we survey those same group of practitioners across Canada, of the ones that have integrated some type of tech in their practice, for sure, early days, their buy-in was rooted in, yeah, they want to clarify the decision-making process, they want brand support, they want to empower the client with information, yes, all that stuff. But some of the hurdles and constraints that they encountered during acquisition are likely rooted in a lot of the reasons why you as BDMs are getting the same objections you're getting initially from the clinic when you approach them, right? So if we can create a roadmap or some vision for them early doors as to how they can integrate their first piece. We saw on Wednesday when companies get their first piece of VALDcon, how many companies are repeat buyers, and then they integrate plates, and then they integrate Nordboard, things like that. So this acquisition phase is so key, because once we get them in the door, I think we would all agree, having used the tech, how influential it can be once you've started to use it, right? You no longer see it as a time constraint. You know it's going to help you. You no longer see it as a monetary constraint. You know that you can monetize it. And also, at the end of the day, it also can reduce blind spots and help with patient outcomes. So if you can for a moment, I just want you to think, what are the terms, long-term consequences or costs for rehab facilities not integrating tech in practice? What does it look like for these facilities to just completely reject technological change, whether it be due to lack of vision or one of the other objections? I think all of us here would agree that without this testing, they're likely unaware of a laundry list of blind spots in the athlete journey and making incomplete decisions around return to sport or performance. So let's flip that around even more. What's the cost of incomplete rehab? Well, when we ask our athletes, we start to see what some of the consequences are in the athlete's life if we don't rehabilitate them completely. And this is a survey that we did with just hundreds of our athletes, just on what they felt like the cost would be if they didn't get what they needed. In the acquisition phase, it's very tough because many practitioners are going to have different perspectives. We all hear the story where somebody comes in with lateral hip pain, sport med doc wants to do a first injection, physiotherapist wants to give 3 sets of 10 shells with red band, strength coach wants to give them squats, massage therapist thinks it's because of 80 trigger points in piriformis. Right? We all have different types of perspectives that we're coming to the table with. And Taylor and I were no different early days. So to do this successfully as a business, in our opinion, early days, in the acquisition phase, we can't practice in a vacuum. We heard a little bit on Wednesday about this siloed approach, and I agree. I don't think we can get rid of silos completely, but there needs to be an amount of communication and crosstalk between silos to overcome the initial objections that we're going to get when we start to implement this tech. So what the key piece to the puzzle was for us in the acquisition phase was communication. And Taylor and I needed to take extreme ownership of our knowledge gaps and blind spots and leave our egos at the door. Because at the end of the day, this process during the acquisition phase is endlessly complex. Humans are complex adaptive systems. Business, rehab, and performance is a complex adaptive system. So naturally, the context in which we interact with practitioners during this phase needs to be a complex adaptive system. But it's through overcoming lack of vision, through communication, that Taylor and I were able to create the vision that we needed to implement the force frame successfully, figure out how we were going to purchase purposefully, and create a roadmap for what pieces of tech we were going to add in down the track. What a lot of companies need to realize, and I think AA likely does this better than anybody else, is the importance of creating initial systems and frameworks. And with the lack of vision, I think a lot of companies can, at the start, find this process too daunting. And they feel like their initial framework for using Valve needs to come by way of perfect, refined systems right from the get-go. Right? But at the end of the day, this is going to be a process, and eventually they need to just get some skin in the game and put pen to paper and just start to refine things. An example I'll give, has anybody seen this script before? So this is a photo we show a lot during our coursework, but North American rapper Eminem has the second highest grossing rap song of all time called Lose Yourself. This is how he started off the process to writing that classic song, right? It's not this refined, lyrical presentation. It's raw, it's messy, it's complex, but obviously at a certain point he was able to refine that into what it became today. The way that we use the force frame today is not the way that we used the force frame back in 2019 in the focus that Taylor showed us. But through leaving our egos at the door and refining our systems, we were able to figure out ways to integrate it into our company. And we'll give you a little bit of insight as to what it looks like today in our new facility. So when you take a look at our new facility, we utilize Valve products in the primary prevention phase with our performance department. Team training, our small group training, our athletes are using Valve tech. And we're able, for those companies that are worried about monetizing it, we're able to monetize it in this arm of the business. We then turn to the secondary prevention pathways that we have, where we're looking at reducing massive time loss for athletes from their sport, and our physiotherapists use Valve products within their pathways. And then recently this year, what we've done is we started to monetize it and use Valve products in our tertiary prevention pathways. So now our sports medicine physician will do a consult, the physio will do a combo clinic and consult with them. And at the end, instead of just getting a diagnosis and medical recommendations, they also leave with performance testing, which is outlining blind spots with their pathomechanics that could be contributing to injury. Okay, so we start to see through a bit of raw framework and vision how we can monetize this through multiple arms of the business. And through this, we create this reductionistic approach, because at the end of the day, in the rehab world, outcomes is at the heart of what we do. And all of the key competencies that we want to see with the athlete, VALTech plays a role. Oh, give me a sec. That one? Yeah, sorry. Happy with that? Okay. So, acquisition phase. Number one key takeaway. Sorry, the writing's messed up on that, guys. But through effective communication and acknowledgement of blind spots, we can clarify vision for these practitioners, which seems to be, when you break it down, their number one objection. Let's dive into implementation. We've acquired the tech. Now we're trying to implement it into practice. What's the biggest problem in the implementation phase? Let's take a look at some studies. In this study, 5% of patients received rehab that followed evidence-based guidelines. 95% did not. 45% stopped seeing a clinician after 3 months. 70% had no plyometrics or changed direction in their rehab plans. And 90% of patients went back to sport without any formal functional evaluation criteria at all. So we think of this as layers, right? The first layer is that sometimes clinicians don't even implement science, even when we give it to them, right? The second layer is they might have lack of vision. Tertiary layer is that in the region that that practitioner exists, there likely is also going to be an amount of contextual constraints from the healthcare system, right? And we'll go over what some of the constraints look like in Canada, but I know in talking to potential prospective clients that likely in their region, some rendition of this exists as well. And that could be a reason why they're a bit hesitant initially at acquiring it, but they're hesitant on how they're going to be able to implement it around these constraints. So if we look at the Canadian healthcare system, we take a look at the first constraint, it's a time constraint. Pre-COVID, treatment times were in 15-minute blocks. Physios would, on average, see 4 clients an hour, 30 clients a day. I talk a lot. By the time I'm done talking to the client, it's been 20 minutes. I'm 5 minutes behind, and I haven't even touched them. So it's really hard to see, especially when I don't think that this valve product is going to be a time saver, how this is going to be implemented into my day-to-day. Post-COVID, average time at big box clinics in Canada, 20, 30 minutes still for treatment. So typically there's multiple patients, they're hopping around a little bit, and Dynamo works great, but for those bigger pieces, force plates, force frame, mortarboard, they don't even have time to drink water, let alone step out into a gym setting and do some testing. So there's a huge time constraint there that can be daunting for practitioners. And then we look at regulatory constraints, and I spoke to a little bit about it on Wednesday, but we have advertising constraints in Canada, and it's different province by province, but we can't offer discounted services, we can't offer free testing, we can't offer any type of incentive, we can't make statements on our website that are comparative to other clinics, or we use tech and they don't, or this is the value of tech. They actively screen websites with AI to start pulling phrases down from websites. Okay? Can't use expert. Can't use, so there's a lot of regulatory constraints. And then there's constraints on promotion of services. On the East Coast of Canada right now, you cannot have testimonials or endorsements in support of you as a physio for a service that you provide. You cannot say, great experience with Travis, used the Dynamo, was able to get data and analytics, never had that before, help my rehab team. That gets taken down, that gets swapped. And then we have some constraints that are rooted in individuals who are suppressive and traditional. They're starting to define physio versus non-physio services, which is a slippery slope when 90% of clients are going back to square without functional evaluation criteria, and only 5% are getting evidence-based care, and we're starting to create definitions around this thing. So if there's that many people that are going to be resistant to technological change, do these products find themselves under a physio umbrella or a non-physio umbrella? Because there's actually different regulations for what you can do in terms of advertising and stuff for non-physio versus physio services. So last one is referral constraints. A surgeon has really good experiences and outcomes with their clients because a practitioner is using VALDtech to quantify the process. They still can't refer to a specific provider, even if they think there's a huge perceived gap between clinics. They have to give generalized physio referrals, and it's up to the patient to make decisions around it. So we could go on and on and on and on and on. But I think you can start to see it's becoming more and more difficult to implement this stuff successfully, right? So it might be easier just to say, no, I'm good. What I'm doing is working in their mind. When we survey our colleagues across Canada, have the ones that implemented tech seen a change in their practice? Absolutely, right? It helps with patient buy-in, confidence in selling our business, quantifying meaningful change, all the things that we here know it does. But for those who have acquired tech and they're in the implementation phase, are they still having lingering struggles? They are. So we can't stop supporting our colleagues during this stage. So again, what's the solution, right? We don't want to provide a bunch of problems and not have solutions for them. So we're going to just give you a bit of insight as to what we did at Orca. And again, this is not the systems we used in 2019, and it won't be the systems we used in 2025, but we had to get some skin in the game and start somewhere. So when we talk about implementation systems, it's likely easiest to break this up into the systems that we have for implementation with our practitioners and the systems that we have for implementation with our athletes. For our practitioners, we use a task manager with AI software called Notion. And within that, we can have all the phenomenal material that Val's working on accessible and linked right in front of our practitioners' eyes, from tutorials to testing protocols to contact information for individuals like Ryan for support. So that's readily available for them in practice. We use an interactive software called Loom, where we can create educational videos on testing protocols. As new research comes out and some of the growing work Paul was talking about before, we can actually do case breakdowns where we can take a look at video analysis, we can take a look at force traces, asymmetries, and talk about how we're going to address those problems. We use a communication software called Slack, where we can post up-and-coming research, new changes or tech that might be coming out from Valve, and continue to upskill our practitioners. And then from an administrative standpoint, we create some framework and systems for our admins. So when a new assessment books in at Orca, immediately our admin creates a hub for them in the Valve profile with the appropriate demographic, date of birth, sex, sport, position. The new physio assessment gets completed. The physio fills out this journey or plan of care for them, so they have an idea of what their pain generators are, the goals, the exit criteria that they need to hit before they go back to sport. They take that out to the front desk. They identify for our admin at the front desk what problem needs to be assigned to the profile, and then what the diagnosis is, so that the admin can, in the moment, send them out patient education material right from the hub. So before that client leaves the door, they've had multiple touch points with the Valve hub. And all of that is done by the admin team, not the physio, so that the physio doesn't feel like this is a burden and increased time. It's through this framework that we build trust with our practitioners and our admin team. And it's through trust that we build commitment. If there is no trust, what we'll build is compliance. And we don't want compliance, we want commitment. Through trust and commitment, we build buy-in. That's not good enough in the implementation phase. That's the start. We're scratching the surface. We also need to realize that we need to navigate the noise of data and analytics, right? What metrics are we even going to look at? Right? There's so many. We've all used the force decks. How many metrics can we add in to the actual results phase? And luckily, there's some amazing infographics and material that's coming out to upskill our practitioners here. We're really close with Matt Jordan from the Canadian Sports Institute. Now he's at the University in Calgary. And he's coming out with some brilliant infographics just on reliability of metrics, what metrics are falling within or outside the noise. I'll have to give a shout out to Ryan, our influencer on social media, coming out with some amazing infographics, which in his eyes, when we were talking about it, he said they're so simple to create, but there's been such a massive response from practitioners because we get 0 of this in school. Right? In Canada, we get 0 SFC principles. Right, so after the acute stage with an injury, we're pretty useless if we don't upskill, and we get 0 in the world of testing and data and analytics. And we try to create some framework of our own around this in the implementation phase at Orca. So this is an example of a poster that we have posted in the kitchen for the practitioners. It's our ACL testing protocol. Within each phase, there's different tests that are being done with asymmetry indexes. We try to update this based on the research that emerges. And again, it outlines for our practitioners with the CMJ, what are we looking at metrics-wise? What are our benchmarks? In the prep phase, eccentric peak velocity, we want at 1.1, 1.2. Certain things there that make it a little bit easier for the practitioners. We have communication boards where between the performance and rehab team, we have all our ACLs written down with the surgeons, the date of the surgery, what graft type, was there any concurrent injuries, and then in green, have they hit their strength curve KPI in the force frame and the dynamo? Or are they in red and they have they hit their vertical jump KPIs? And if they haven't, what's the outlying metric? Are we working on RSI? Is this a concentric impulse issue with the client? And what happens there is when the rehab team tests them, and they can go back and see this, the performance team gets a quick glance too, and it just, again, from a communication standpoint, leads to less miscommunication. We have test standardizations that are posted in our kitchens in regards to our testing protocols for our CMJ, single leg CMJ. How many reps, rest between, are we doing the non-op or operative limb first? What are our verbal cues that we're giving them for these jumps? And then we solidify all this through monthly roundtable discussions, which we bring both the performance and rehab practitioners together to discuss challenging cases. Just on the left. And then we also do a monthly technical clinic where we get together in the treatment rooms and we talk case-specific technical problems. Patellar tendinopathy, what are we testing? Proximal hamstring strain, what are we testing? Right? Because as we add in 5-6 pieces of tech, it's obviously not realistic nor essential to be doing all the tests that each piece of tech offers. So we help our therapists try to navigate through how to use this for clinical reasoning and practice. For our athletes, for implementation, we standardize our warm-up protocol. That gets put either on their programming, it's on YouTube. They do the same protocol before each sports science test. We also create athlete independence. It's a video from one of Taylor's teams, women's semi-pro soccer team. And for anybody who's used the tech, obviously once you learn how to use it, the learning curve is not massive for this. It's pretty self-explanatory. And our athletes actually end up testing themselves for the weekly jumps. It's our job to make sure that they're on point in terms of their standardization. But the tech can be pretty, again, this for us is not a time constraint, but we still get the data that we need. And the last piece for patients in terms of implementation is we need to know our audience, which we'll talk a little bit in the last kind of piece of the presentation. But we talk to our therapists a lot about audience stratification and what are the characteristics of the patient that's in front of you, and how are you going to use that data or communicate that data to that patient. So the key takeaway here in the implementation phase, systems and frameworks are going to underpin successful implementation. And as we just showed, they don't need to start by way of perfect, well thought out processes. We need to start somewhere, and the clinics need to realize that. Let's dive into the last piece, retention. What's the problem in the retention phase? We've acquired the tech, we've implemented the tech. Now we want to retain our clients and get an outcome. It's a road in Norway. We use this photo a lot. And each time a client comes to our clinic and goes through, they're essentially at the bottom of this road. They have no idea where the turns are, how long it's going to take them to get to the top. Are there roadblocks? Do they have enough gas to get to the top? It's up to us to try to clarify that path to recovery for them. We can either lose our clients in the data and analytics, or it can be the one thing that can solidify buy-in with their plan of care. Okay? The biggest problem in the retention phase is that poor communication leads to miscommunication. We need to make sure that there's a balance between patient expectations and therapist expectations. We're very big on letting our physios know that you might have a client in front of you that doesn't care about their RFD, asymmetry, or their RSI. We need to know how to relate to that individual as well. All of this is underpinned by the patient's previous beliefs, perceptions, power dynamics, influence tactics, and their past experiences. With competitors on the market, have they used tech in their rehab before? Maybe they had a poor experience. The patient's really not interested. So it's up to us in the retention phase to paint a picture for the client. And for that, at Orca, we put huge amounts of focus on communication and effective explanations. Communication's at the heart, and it's through that we can build outcomes and culture, which, as Taylor alluded to, is our top priority within our four walls. So in order to do that properly and leverage the data that we're getting, we need to answer, who is our audience? Who is the individual in front of us? And for the physios in the room, I think you would agree, you could present the exact same information about 5 or 6 different ways to 5 or 6 different clients, right? You have different spiels for the same issue, whether it be mobility, strength, power, for different patients that are presenting in front of you. The VAL dashboard plays a massive, massive, massive role here, and will continue to do so as more and more integrations are added to the dashboard in terms of normative values and curves. It's so, so powerful. So if we take a look at the 4 different type of listeners that we have as clients, we break it down into these 4 categories. So we take a look at the pain-oriented client, or the pain-oriented listener. They might get distracted from the content of the data and the message, and all they really care about is their pain. That's it. So if we don't, as practitioners, figure out a way to link the overview or the information we're getting, as practitioners, we know it's important and it does link to their pain, but if we can't communicate how, we're always going to run the risk of them not coming back to their second visit. Proms and other tools that are in there, like patient education tools, are a beautiful way for us to relate to this type of listener. We take a look at the action-oriented listener. They prefer well-organized, precise, accurate information. They get likely pretty frustrated with long-winded explanations. We just stay on the overview page. We might not even go to the overview page. We might just stay on the app with the new visualization that's coming up. And that's enough for that type of client. There might be more that we dive into behind the scenes when we go back to program, but in the moment, that's all they need. We have the content-oriented listener. They're analytical. They love complex processes, messages. We might dive into the results page. along with the overview with this athlete and go into the weeds a little bit on some of this stuff. That's what they enjoy. That's their expectation, right? So we meet them on their level. And then we have the time-oriented client who really is just concerned about task completion. And that's it. They want to know how long it's going to take them to achieve certain things. So we'll give them a bit of insight as to how their jumps are going to progress. We're going to go from probably strength testing to our double leg vertical jumps. We'll move into some faster stretch shortening cycle drills that'll increase from cyclic hops to drop jumps. We might do some loaded jumps or single leg jumps as we get a little bit deeper into rehab. And then we give them a bit of idea as to how we can expect that stuff to recover on the overview page or hub. It's likely that if they have issues with range of motion and capacity, there's going to be strength deficits. If they have issues with strength asymmetry, we're likely going to see vertical jump deficits. The percentiles are a beautiful way for these time-oriented individuals to see where they're at on the timeline and the track. And through the integration of multiple pieces of tech, we can say, yes, you have a phase-specific counter-movement jump asymmetry, but look, we've got a 20% asymmetry in your quads. Let's deal with that first. And then we can expect those phase-specific asymmetries to resolve, or we can tackle those then. So again, effective explanations and knowing our audience is the way that we retain our clients. And by retaining our clients, we get good outcomes. By getting good outcomes, we increase brand awareness and we get more new people in the room. Within a healthcare system that we cannot get direct referrals from docs and surgeons themselves. And this is what it looks like in practice. It was ironic this morning we got tagged in an overview page, so we thought we tossed it in. But the minute that the overview page became printable, and I know there's some debate on whether or not it's going to be utilized, patients ate it up. Ate it up. And for us, that has our logo. We see a lot of green, and it's easy marketing for us. That's not enough in the retention phase. Once we know our audience and we know how to communicate the data and we have the metrics and we're confident with the metrics that we have, we need to be able to address the metrics or we're screwed, right? We need to be able to identify what matters. We need to be precise as we add more and more pieces of valve tech into our suite so that we can use this for clinical reasoning and not get lost in the world of data and analytics. And then we need to address what matters. And I think some of the hesitancy early days, like I said, there's massive gaps in strength and conditioning principles in Canada with physiotherapists, and I'd be the first to admit it. But some of them are likely nervous that this is going to show the glaring blind spots they have in programming because it's going to show them things that they're not really sure how to address. Outside of hypertrophy and capacity, they might not know how to address peak power or FD. These might be foreign concepts, so it's easier, again, just to take a step back. So again, when we look at identifying, we try to create some systems for our clinicians to make this a little bit easier, right? For our practitioners, we want to make sure that this is not, incorporating this stuff is not a time constraint for them. So we have systems for performance profiling. We have infographics and systems for fatigue monitoring. And for the rehabilitation department, we have injury-specific rehabilitation testing. And that can differ in terms of tests and metrics we might look at for slow stretch shortening cycle tasks like the CMJ or single leg CMJ, or things like Paul alluded to this morning with faster stretch shortening cycle tests like the drop jumps, in terms of RSI, contact time, things like that. These are posted all throughout the kitchen along with the ACL infographics, just to make the onboarding process a little bit easier as we bring you. When we're trying to be precise, we try to help out from a mentorship perspective with our clinicians in terms of navigating the different types of tech that we have, right? So again, if they have a counter movement depth asymmetry, or sorry, if we kind of flag counter movement depth as an issue, What's their knee flexion range of motion? What's their ankle dorsiflexion? What's their eccentric quad strength? Do we need to get on the plates and do a little bit of a double leg squat for a functional test? We try to just create some loose framework for workflow that they can run with in the clinical decision-making process. Same thing with the ACL infographic. Like we talked about, we have metrics of interest or benchmarks that are there so that they can work outside of the world of asymmetry. And then we have some pathology-specific frameworks that they can work off of from some coursework that's been done internationally. Again, we have Teller quadricep musculotendinous issue. We might look at knee extension on the dynamo, calf test on the frame, hip extension on the dynamo frame, hip flexion, some power and reactive strength work on the plates, and then we bring them onto the turf and do some linear and multiplanar competency and sport-specific movement. Same workflow for Achilles gastrosoleus injuries. And then same kind of workflow for proximal hamstring. We need to be able to address the deficits that are there to retain clients. If we don't get outcomes, we don't retain clients. If there's knee extension asymmetry deficits on the dynamo, we have a workflow for strength capacity for our physios to work off of a framework. Does that mean that they can't add a different drill in it? No, it's options to look at. If there's a hip extension asymmetry, they have gluteal options for strength. Hamstring iso on the Nord board, they have knee dominant, hip dominant hamstring. Let's say the issues with greater force development, not strength. They have lost the options they can build up. If we have phase-specific impulse asymmetries with our ACLs, we might have phase-specific RSD and power drills that they look at. If it's a general concentric asymmetry, you might have general power continuums that will work off. Eccentric deceleration. Paul talked earlier about our continuum. Maybe a double leg calls for it, then a single leg calls for it. Maybe we weight that up with a trap bar or dumbbell. We move into some altitude drops or some forward doors and off. It's a bit of a continuum for our therapists to work off of. No different with the reactive strength. Pogos, tuck jumps, drop jumps. So again, retaining clients in the retention phase, key takeaways, knowing our audience gives us social agility to streamline communication and leverage our data, but it's by having reproducible systems that we can successfully address what matters. We'll just end with a bit of a tale of caution, and I'll leave names out of it, but just a little bit of a situation Taylor and I are dealing with right now in Canada. And it's an interesting case because we have a group of athletes who are in soccer, female soccer, and the way that it's set up with those athletes is that regardless who's having them, their return to sport needs to be checked off by a specific athletic department, irregardless. So if we test them on the full valve suite with these systems and we say they're ready to go or they're not ready to go, it doesn't matter. This athletic therapy department has to be the one that clears it. Fine, we open up lines of communication. We work as an integrated community team. We try to, have some insights as to where we feel like they're at. They're now getting tested as part of research studies with force plates and dynamometers. The individuals that are testing them are brilliant, but have nothing to do with the decision making or programming. They test them, they take the data, the metrics, they give it to the athletic therapy department, and the athletic therapy department uses it to make decisions, but they haven't been upskilled and never used the tech themselves. So what we see is in every industry, the pendulum can always shift and swing way too far in each direction. And in this specific scenario, we have on a micro level, a company whose inability has no ability to determine what matters. They're not the ones addressing what matters. We're seeing the athlete. They're not doing the testing. They're solely working off base imagery with no normative data or benchmarks. And returning individuals to sport with low asymmetry, who could be in the second or third percentile in terms of strength. So they have a symmetrical weak athlete going back to sport. They're getting re-injured. Or flip that around and they have an individual with a 12% in asymmetry instead of under 10, but they're in the 99th percentile for their age, gender, and sport, and holding them back from sport. Right? And this is gray. Return to sport is always gray. It's not black and white. But these are some of the things I think we consider as individuals start to try to integrate this stuff without figuring out how they're going to implement it and don't have the systems to actually implement it properly. So on a macro level, we looked earlier, what's the cost to the athlete if this happens? We're going to have return to sport implications. There's going to be psychological implications, whether we return them back too early or we hold them back when we know they're ready. That's going to create issues for trust. And we know that when athletes go off sport, that's their identity. That's their team, that's their family. And they start to lose that. So the core message that we just kind of want to leave you guys with is based on that case study and just tale of caution and everything we discussed kind of through the presentation. Each practitioner that we talk to in the acquisition phase is going to come to the situation with a different set of rejections and contextual constraints, right? But it's by creating vision, the implementation and creation of systems, and effective communication that we can successfully acquire, implement, and retain clients using this type of tactic and ultimately create the culture we want to see between our four walls.
We'll probably have time for one or two questions and then lunch is on there as well. So if there's any questions, raise your hand. I'll throw a mic up. You can ask Rob or Dave. Otherwise, they are here all week.
Yeah.
The drum.
Cheers. What they would tell themselves 3 years ago.
Am I good to go? Question. Brilliant presentation. I just want to ask a question around, you kind of started your kind of journey starting with tech. And obviously we're working with a lot of companies that may be fully booked. They feel like they're doing the right thing, but we then turn up with a set of full stacks, a dynamo, and they're like, look, we're doing a great job anyway. But there might be 1 or 2 physios in there, S&C coaches that really want to use it. When you first started, did you actually have a team that kind of really drove this tech forward, or was it you two specifically, or did you have like a bit of a pioneer who was going around helping with the training, helping with the teaching of new clinicians? Because obviously the work that you've done on the presentations of all the continuums, there's fundamentally like a lot of work, amazing work there. Just mostly interested to know, should it be like, should companies specifically choose 1 or 2 people to really push forward with it, or should it be more of a team approach?
Yeah, good question. I think just for context, when Taylor and I first started having discussions, I was in a big box with one. I had 0 knowledge on principles. I like Dave's hindsight should have not been saying any flying longer than 12 weeks.
probably would have been through it. And that for us, I was treating at the time of and taking some deep dives into kind of where my gaps were in educational field. We had no dynamometer. We really didn't have anything like at all. So when Jay and I came together, he had a little bit more insight into just the kind of dynamometer was like being used in the performance space. And I think at the end of the day, none of what we just showed unavailable. That's not none of that stuff. We've got both enforcement, some of respected companies like Girl His Group, and it came towards some research. It's all available. All we've got to create just a workable workflow. So we didn't start with the tech per se, but it was Taylor and I who were driving. And I think in a sense we present what it looks like right now, but I could probably do 2 hours on all the mistakes that we made along the way too. But we never had sports scientists or anything like that, so we were in the trenches kind of trying to again figure out sort of your system. I think for the companies that again, like you said, as therapists who want to integrate stuff like that, just talking to Ryan, they didn't want to take it anyways. Where we found is the power of learning those companies. And those often tend to be the suspicious traditional physios who have knowledge gaps and they want to hit them. And I think that's to make this commonplace, that's where we start. Or those practitioners may need to figure out that facility's not right fit for them. And hopefully there'll be more and more performance station at facilities that can help. So there's options for those practitioners and power brokers.
I think to add on to that, the one thing, the comments of shooting for 1 or 2 people that are driving that. And I think the biggest piece for me is that if you have somebody that's passionate in that space, I think passion inspires change within staff. So for us, when I first got it, we knew that in the candidate office, we never had access to this type of technology. We really saw that we could really make an impact on our athletes, which at the center is what matters. So I think our initial passion with it was able to inspire some of our staff to step in and kind of dive a little bit further into it. But I also think through the presentation as well, like Trav mentioned, it really was a messy process to get to this point, and I think it's going to continue to evolve as well. If you do have individuals that's passionate about it and driving forward and step in and sacrifice their time to develop it further, I think you end up with
Yeah, great. Awesome presentation. I think you started to actually address the question I was going to ask in terms of, you're dealing with a motivated population, athletes who want to get back to their chosen sport in a lot of those cases. In talking about kind of those big box physio clinics who are dealing with the general population, any advice kind of to them to maybe get their populations more ready for this and maybe, more acceptable for this approach?
on one piece, but trying to go more experience in the States. I think when you start to explore the idea of the general population in the bigger box clinics, for me, what I see to be the biggest impact is how much of you simplify that reintegration, which is going to be the underlying framework of the education that will then allow them to see the end result of, and it might not be returning to the field, it might actually be that they just want to take up the ground. And being able to share what that technology can do to guide the process, I think, is where it starts in these bigger box clinics. But we've been so.
Well, I agree. I think that is all that. I think it depends on the big box clinic. I'm very bottom line voluntary for them. So they need to see. You may discuss all the things that are making processes and all that. It really depends how we do it. So it's maintenance and class, and we can frame it on how it's going to help you outcomes and different outcomes. We be on different places and new places that have someone to like from connections with the lab and staff. What's an individual to go close to any of this? I think there's a lot of people who do that, treat me like a professional athlete. Right? I want my hand better because I have to pick up the ground, it's very wide. I got to push it back, throw from her, so they kind of appreciate you, testing them, and then they see an athlete off, and they kind of so I think the individuals that you think they're struggling to buy in is what the nice about it.
Thanks, guys.